Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for May 17th, 2023. I want to begin with a program note. This weekend is a 4-day weekend in Germany. I will have an update for you tomorrow, Thursday, but there will not be an update on Friday, but I'll be back again on Monday. Now, what I want to talk about today is the fact that the wheels are coming off the global NATO coalition, which Biden and Blinken and others brag is indivisible. It's a unified commitment. Well, a unified commitment to do what? Now, the war is continuing because there is a commitment to permanent war, which Biden and others are supporting based on the domination of their governments by the corporate cartels of the broad-based military-industrial complex. So you have the US, the Brits, the Germans, and the French continuing to provide weapons and aid to Zelensky's puppet regime in Kiev. Yet as Russian strikes were hammering down on Kiev's military sites yesterday, it's clear Ukraine is being set up by its so-called allies for total annihilation. Zelensky and his government appear to believe that they have no option but to fight to the last Ukrainian. And the US-NATO alliance remains willing to let the destruction of Ukraine play out as long as Russia is weakened in the process. So, but the Western unity, which is bragged about by Biden and his team of junior varsity advisors, is cracking. In Europe, polls are showing a significant decline in support for the war and the economic policies of the European Union. That the vassal states of the EU may be in a situation in the near future where there'll be breaks in the unity. Germany, for example, which just pledged more aid and more commitment to the war in Ukraine, the coalition government is only at about 40% support, so it's not nearly a majority. And the elections in Bremen last weekend showed a significant drop of support for one of the main coalition partners, the Greens. They lost 6% of the vote, nearly a third of their total. And this is probably going to continue as the Greens are the most outspoken supporters of the war. Demonstrations are continuing in France against Macron, and in NATO member Turkey, which is a reluctant NATO ally right now. The President Erdogan has been pushing for a negotiated settlement. In his election last Sunday, he came just short of the 50% majority needed, so he'll be in a second round, but comfortably ahead of the opposition forces. Now, in this situation, we're seeing the unstable Zelensky freaking out, probably as a combined result of all of this. He had an interview with the Washington Post last week, and he was asked about Pentagon documents, which claim that the Ukrainian military intelligence unit can and might blackmail Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner group, and someone who's being promoted as a potential adversary against Putin inside Russia. Now, when Zelensky was asked about this, he went totally ballistic. He refused to discuss the allegation. Instead, he went on an offensive. He asked the reporters, "Is your goal to help Russia? Why are you doing this? Why are you asking these questions?" Now, it's clear he's unused to being challenged because there's an adulation for him which borders on the highest level of sycophancy you've ever seen. And as a result, the Washington Post ended up deleting this section of the interview. But that's not the end of the story. The Notorious disinformation agency, the so-called Committee to Combat Disinformation of the Ukrainian government, which itself is a major spreader of disinformation, they attacked the interview. They described it as part of a campaign of, quote, rumors, unquote, spreading, quote, unverified and unconfirmed information not to be trusted, unquote. They conclude with the following statement. quote, trust only sources of verified information, unquote. Now, who are they referring to there? Obviously, the Ukrainian government, which has been notorious for spreading spinning stories, attacking anyone who's critical of the war as a information terrorist, and is obviously committed to shutting down any discussion of the real situation in Ukraine. So we can see how unstable this situation is. Now, here are more matters of concern for NATO and its war hawks. There was a full-page ad in the New York Times yesterday, signed by real national security experts, which attacked the expansion of NATO, spoke of the failure of diplomacy to address Russian concerns, and cited the need for diplomacy, for real negotiations. They cited John F. Kennedy on the need to avert confrontation in the nuclear age. And they went on to say, quote, diplomacy is not a sign of weakness, it is wisdom, unquote. So now we're seeing national security experts coming out openly against the policy of the war and the refusal to negotiate. Now then, and I'll have a link to the ad below. The head of Ukraine's Supreme Court was detained yesterday and charged with corruption as part of the continuing attempt to cover up the corruption in Ukraine. There is corruption in Ukraine. The Seymour Hersh reported on at least $400 million of U.S. aid that was siphoned off by Zelensky and his top lieutenants. There's much more than that, and we'll see what happens from this latest scandal in Ukraine. Then there's a report of the problems supplying the weapons that have been promised. Real bottlenecks in the production levels of the military-industrial complex, shortage of skilled technicians, shortage of raw materials, and the inability to work on both new technologies like the hypersonic weapons and still sustain the level of pledges that they've made to Ukraine. Now, one example of this is what's happening in the United Kingdom. According to the Daily Telegraph, in order to keep the aircraft carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth II operable, they're taking parts from the HMS Prince of Wales, the other major so-called modern aircraft carrier of the British Navy. The Daily Telegraph described this as a cannibalization of the Prince of Wales. I think it was the Prince of Wales that when they tried to take it out of dock some months ago, within about 10 nautical miles, it broke down and had to be towed back into port. Now, then finally, as we're getting reports that continue to surface of the fundamental weakness of the U.S. banking system and the failure to come up with a plan to address the overall debt crisis and collapse of the economy in the West, we're seeing escalation of moves toward protection of the global South nations from the contamination of the collapsing rules-based order. This week, there will be a major conference sponsored by China, which will include 5 Central Asian republics. They'll be meeting in Xi'an, which is the former head of the ancient Silk Road. Trade between China and these Central Asian republics hit a record of $70 billion last year, a 20% increase over 2021. And among the items on the agenda, besides the question of financing for major infrastructure and trade and investment, they'll be discussing cooperation in rebuilding and stabilizing Afghanistan after the destruction imposed on it by the U.S.-NATO war, the long war against Afghanistan. Now, for more on the moves toward a new development paradigm, as part of realizing a plan for peace through development, I will be discussing this in my weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche today. And you can join it live at 11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, or it will be archived if you can't make it at that time. So there'll be a link to that at the bottom of the description section. And also, I apologize for those who were unable to open the link yesterday to the incredibly important speech given by John F. Kennedy on June 10th, 1963 at American University. We'll have a link that can be opened at the bottom of the description page today. So thanks for joining me. I'll see you again tomorrow. Hello, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Support our independence to produce videos like these. Become a member of the LaRouche organization at thelarouche.org/member. By becoming a member for $25 or more, you'll get special access to the EIR Alert Daily Briefing and Weekly Magazine, which is what I read to stay on top of things.